Well, thank you all for watching. My name is Ross, and I have the privilege of hosting these conversations. And today I'm sitting down with Pastor Greg Wenhold. Welcome.
Thank you, Ross. Good to be here.
Now, this is part of our Ask Us Anything series. I appreciate you guys watching. So, Pastor Greg, I just want to jump right into it. Today, we're talking about the lay minister of word and sacrament. So, Pastor Greg, what is a lay minister of word and sacrament?
So it goes back to, I think, the early church, Acts 6. The church was dealing with some more extensive need for leadership, and they lifted up a group of people to help them out. Paul also talks about it in his first letter to Timothy. They are known as traditionally deacons. But this is a part of our journey here at Good Shepherd because we are in a place where we now have the ability to do things like share in leadership extension, meaning blessing moments, not just for called pastors, but for lay ministers to be a part of what we know our ministry to be word and sacrament.
Sure. So one of the questions that I think comes up here is we are a church, Lutheran, the Lutheran tenet of all the ground is level at the foot of the cross. And yet we are making a decision, intentional decision to not only have ordained pastors, but also to have some level of set apartness for these folks that we're describing here in our context, but also just as we move forward.
Right.
Can you help people understand, especially in a moment when ordination as a whole seems to be less of a focus for the church, why it theologically matters, but also why we believe it matters to us?
We just have to make sure, without a doubt, that we're training people up in the truth of what we know
Mm-hmm.
our tradition and theology to be grounded biblically. So when we do this, we don't just do it nonchalantly. We care about what we're doing. We train the individuals, and they will be trained not only in their preaching, because the individuals lifted up have a pathway to pastoring.
Mm-hmm.
They're in the midst of that in education at different levels, but they'll also be trained within the sacramental moments of the two sacraments of baptism and Holy Communion. And they'll know exactly why they're doing it and the reasons behind. So, as I said, it's not a nonchalant thing. Definitely something we've focused on. We have teams that interview, guide, and direct and care for.
Yeah. I'm really excited about it, particularly because it honors this tradition we have here of we'll use the phrase, the plurality of leadership. Our congregation likes to talk about being congregationally led. We like to talk about the fact that we are very grassroots, and this is an extension of that,
Yes.
even as it has particular roles for some of our folks on staff. Because I know it's a question that's come up and will continue to come up when folks encounter someone who they're not used to administering communion or performing a baptism, or they're not used to seeing someone in an alb or anything like that. I'm curious how you help people understand, to use one of our favorites, Ryan Hammer, as an example, the journey that he's on theologically, but also what those various moments where they may see them mean.
Sure. The church has some tradition within especially our sanctuary services, of wearing a robe, an alb. It dates back, I think, years past, something that we've inherited
Sure.
that has a sacred response of leadership to it. So people look and they say, "Oh, you're pastorally leading us."
Mhm.
There is a bridge, though, when individuals become ordained, set aside as ordained pastors, of which now we're taking another step in the journey where a stole is worn also with an alb, and that signifies an ordained role. And so we at our church have three ordained pastors, myself and Pastor Pamela Palmer, and our senior leader, Pastor Tara Beth. And so you will see us not in only in robes, albs, but also in stoles in our traditional services. And then those who are lay ministers, they're taking that step where you will see them wearing albs or a white robe during worship.
Yeah, I'm really excited about the fact that this is a there's a level of recognition of what God's already up to, but
Right.
also looking ahead to what God's continuing to do.
Right.
And as we wrap up, one of the things I'm curious about here is there's folks who are watching this who maybe they have deacons in their church, or maybe there's some other process that they're engaging. They don't go to Good Shepherd. What I'm curious about for you is how does this type of process for us encourage you about the future of our church, somewhat independently of the theology we've already talked about?
And it does. You cannot just place the burden of doing word and sacrament ministry just on called pastors when we have a church as large as Good Shepherd.
Yeah.
And so what this does is it allows us to impact the church on a very structured and cared for and educated level. Once again, I'm going to use that word. This is not nonchalant. This is
Yeah.
something that we've prayed about, discerned. We have a team that's looking at who and why should we do this first, and then who would be a part of this. And so the individuals that we're looking at are on a road to what we consider significant pastoral ministry.
Yeah. And to use these three folks as an example, Ryan Hammer, who I mentioned, Elizabeth Lecca, and Max Shiwi, these are folks who have already pastored. I like to
Correct.
talk about pastoring as a verb, especially for those three. Though these are folks who, to use Elizabeth as an example, has been pastoring for a long time with folks in our families, with students particularly. And one of the things that I'm very proud of for our church is the idea that this can be both an affirmation of what the work that God's already been up to in her life and a sort of a mark of responsibility for her as
Right.
she continues in this journey as soon in the timeline where we're having this conversation, a soon to be pastor. So
Yeah, and all three of those individuals are on a pathway that's leading them to called ordained ministry, but they're all at different places on that pathway.
right. So
You mentioned Elizabeth is really close to a day of ordination, which then, when she does cross over that bridge, that moment, having been affirmed by people in the congregation, having been at least placed through some sort of, and I don't want to call it testing or a moment, but there will be a review panel that will review the qualifications that Elizabeth brings, as there
yeah,
will for future individuals, Ryan, Max, others along that pathway. And so we are, as I said, taking this seriously. Elizabeth then will become a part of the ordained role of word and sacrament. Max and Ryan studying hard, and
mm,
they're on that pathway. Their hearts are big for pastoral ministry, and we give thanks that as a lay position of word and sacrament, they're able to take on this role as well.